So I actually thought last night things were going to go boom in Venezuela. I mean, we continue to inch closer and closer to that war every single day. Just yesterday afternoon, the Pentagon announced Operation Southern Spear as the Ford carrier strike group entered the Caribbean, which is a lot of firepower and it can't stay there forever. Oh, also, on Wednesday, President Trump was given options to strike inside of Venezuela. So yeah, things really seem to be trending in that direction. Let's get into what we know. Yesterday afternoon, Secretary Hegseth announced, quote, President Trump ordered action and the Department of War is delivering. Today, I'm announcing Operation Southern Spear, led by Joint Task Force Southern Spear and U.S. Southern Command. This mission defends our homeland, removes narco-terrorists from our hemisphere, and secures our homeland from the drugs that are killing our people. The Western Hemisphere is America's neighborhood, and we will protect it. Now, there was a little confusion there because Operation Southern Spear technically was announced on January 28, 2025. Taking from the U.S. Navy's website that's still live right now, they said, quote, Operation Southern Spear will deploy unmanned air and surface vessels to help determine combinations of unmanned vehicles and manned forces to provide coordinated maritime domain awareness and conduct counter-narcotics operations. Now, I've not seen any clarification from the Navy or SOUTHCOM or the Pentagon or the White House about if this is the same thing that the Secretary is just announcing again, or if it's like version 2.0, or if they're merging together. I mean, there's definitely some overlap here, right? Talking about domain awareness and counter-narcotics operations fits with what we're seeing in SOUTHCOM right now, but the naming aspect there is a little confusing. Either way, it's pretty safe to assume that Operation Southern Spear is going to include the lethal strikes that we are seeing carried out against cartel boats and trafficking boats, and maybe even against the Maduro regime in Venezuela. In fact, on Wednesday, CBS News reported that senior military officials had presented President Trump with updated options for strikes inside of Venezuela, including on land, according to multiple sources familiar with the meetings at the White House. They said Secretary Hegseth, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Dan Kane, and other senior officials briefed the president on military options for the coming days. They added that no final decision had been made, and the White House and Pentagon spokespeople declined to comment. Now, the timing is a little bit weird here. This announcement that Southern Spear is underway doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But before getting into that, a quick thank you to the sponsor of today's video, Surfshark. Have you ever noticed how the internet kind of stopped feeling private? Every app wants your permission, every website tracks everything you click, even streaming some shows depends where you are. It's kind of frustrating, right? That's why I partnered with Surfshark. It's a VPN that keeps your data secure and lets you browse freely without being tracked or blocked. With one account, you can use it on unlimited devices, your laptop, phone, or even smart TV, and it works across all major platforms. They've got coverage in over 100 countries, so you can access content from anywhere, and their kill switch makes sure that your information stays protected even if your connection drops. Most importantly, Surfshark has a strict no logs policy, which means they don't collect or store your data. Full stop. Now, it's easy to set up, and there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk in trying it out. So if you want to take back some privacy online and actually control who sees your data, this is the way to do it. Go to surfshark.com/Preston Stewart and use code Preston Stewart to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN for free. That's surfshark.com/Preston Stewart. The link is in the description. And thank you so much to Surfshark for sponsoring today's video. All right, so here's the thing with naming military operations. It's very normal, and every operation has a name from the minute, at least in the United States, from the minute that planning begins. Most of the time, those operation names aren't made public, but I mean, we're talking about like training exercises, National Guard deployments across the U.S., even deployments overseas. There's just not a reason to give those a name. The bigger, more public operations end up, we become familiar with those terms. Like in Iran a couple months ago, Operation Midnight Hammer, which is one of the reasons why the announcement yesterday led a lot of people, myself included, to think something's happening. Something's about to go down right now, because there's no other reason. There's nothing gained from announcing the name of an operation. You don't gain the capabilities to strike somewhere you previously couldn't, or naming an operation does not allow for more resources or to deploy additional assets or anything like that. It's literally just kind of a PR move. It's announcing to the public like the name of what you're doing. And the timing is weird because these strikes have been going on for a couple months now. And the last time we had a named operation come out like this that I can recall was Operation Midnight Hammer, when the U.S. carried out strikes against the Iranian nuclear facility. So it sounded like maybe the name was coming out, and then the next news we would get, maybe wake up this morning to find out that certain cartel facilities, maybe Venezuelan military facilities inside of the country, had actually been hit overnight. Now, we have to address the elephant in the room here. This is not my area of expertise, but there's a pretty significant domestic political scandal going on right now around the release of the Epstein files. I feel like we can't completely dissociate from the timing. That said, anything to suggest that these operations or the escalation in Venezuela or against the cartels is deliberately some sort of distraction from this issue in the United States would be pure speculation. So I want to make that clear. That said, on Wednesday, these files came out, a lot of emails between Epstein and others that included President Trump and a lot of other people, senior officials in the U.S. and elsewhere. That day lines up with when the president was briefed on possible targets inside of Venezuela. Again, not unusual given the buildup of military forces we have in the region. And then Thursday, the announcement of the Operation Southern Spear. That's what's just a little bit odd. I mean, there's a little bit of me that thinks it was just meant as a PR move, a bit of a distraction, but didn't really get much attention at all. So if that was the idea, I don't think it played out. Now, Maduro actually made himself seen in Venezuela the last couple of days. I think he's definitely starting to feel more and more pressure, where he had a message to the American people and to President Trump. And as we play this, I just want you to keep in mind, this message appears to be working. And it's not just, every time he goes on camera like this, every time he talks, he's definitely talking to the Venezuelan people, more and more trying to address the Americans. But I think there's a piece here as well, kind of trying to set him up in a different place, kind of more aligned maybe with other countries around the world, to include some U.S. allies. Let's give that a quick listen.
What is your message to the people of the United States, President?
To unite for the peace of the continent. No more endless wars, no more unjust wars, no more Libya, no more Afghanistan.
Do you have a message for President Trump?
My message is, yes, peace. Yes, peace.
So look, we've said it 100 times in this channel, but Maduro's not a good dude. That said, I think this messaging is actually pretty effective, and especially when we get into some of the U.S. allies recently that are distancing themselves more and more from U.S. operations in the Caribbean. I mean, look, you have the Venezuelan defense minister who time and again has come out and said, we are going to defend every square inch. We are ready to take on the Americans. And they're probably not, but that's one message. We're ready to stand and fight. Maduro's kind of striking a different tone here, saying peace, love, harmony, no more Afghanistan, no more Libya. We just want to live peacefully. What's up, guys? And that's a stark difference from what we're going to hear from a lot of U.S. senior officials, to include Secretary of State Marco Rubio. And we'll play that here in a moment. But I think that messaging, I think there's some room for that messaging. Whether or not it's effective or not, I think there's some openings there right now. Just a couple days ago, we got news that the United Kingdom, Canada, and Colombia are no longer sharing intelligence that could lead to the U.S. carrying out strikes in the Caribbean. So that is not a blanket stop of intel with Colombia, I think it is. But with the UK and Canada, they're just not sharing any intel they acquire in the Caribbean. France also came out saying they believe these strikes to be illegal. And just yesterday, the Panamanian president, Jose Raul Molino, said, quote, "We will not allow Panamanian territory to be used for actions against Venezuela or any other country. We are a reliable partner, but our sovereignty is non-negotiable." And it does look like more and more any actions taken against not just the cartels, but possibly Venezuela, are going to be unilateral in nature. In fact, the question about this, the UK walking away from intel sharing, was brought up to Tom Homan, the U.S. border czar, earlier today, and he just outright said something I didn't really expect. Let's give that a quick listen.
What is your reaction to the idea that a key ally like the UK is so sceptical of the legality of your operation?
First of all, it's out of my mind, but I don't think UK is a friend of this country, a friend of the president. I don't think there's skepticism, and I'm not familiar with not sharing intelligence. Again, it's out of my mind. I'm the border guy, so that's a question for the ex.
So look, to any of the Brits out there watching, I still like you guys. I think we can still be friends. But, Homan not running foreign policy, not by a long shot, but it kind of gives you an idea, I think, of how the United States is viewing a lot of this, of we are going to take care of this, whether our allies are on board or not. In fact, Secretary Rubio talked about this yesterday as well, saying, look, the Europeans should not be lecturing us about what we're doing off our own shores.
I don't think that the European Union gets to determine what international law is. No, they certainly don't get to determine is how the United States defends its national security. The United States is under attack from organized criminal narco-terrorists in our hemisphere, and the president is responding in the defense of our country. I do find it interesting that all these countries want us to send, and supply, for example, nuclear-capable Tomahawk missiles to defend Europe. But when the United States positions aircraft carriers in our hemisphere where we live, somehow that's a problem. So I would say that the United States is, and this president has made very clear, his job is to protect the United States from threats against the United States, and that is what he's doing in this operation.
Now, in fairness, the concern that I've seen from countries around the world, to include some people here in the United States, isn't about the deployment of a U.S. carrier to the Caribbean, it's the strikes. But according to Rubio, those strikes are definitely set to continue here for the foreseeable future. In fact, you're going to see here in a minute Secretary Rubio starting to kind of mix these two lines of effort, I think. We've got the cartels in one category, then we've got Maduro and the Venezuelan government in another, and every so often we see those kind of come together. They're definitely two different efforts that require two different, capability sets and two different desired end states, but I feel like more and more we're talking about those in the same sentence. That's the direction Rubio goes right here.
But again, going back, look, this is a counter-drug operation. The president's ordered it in defense of our country. It continues. It's ongoing. It can stop tomorrow if they stop sending drug boats. The Maduro regime is a narco-terrorist regime indicted in the Southern District of the United States for narco-terrorism. But more importantly, they're also a transshipment organization that allows these groups to operate from their national territory. They allow drugs to be shipped. They openly cooperate with the shipping of these drugs towards the United States and Europe, by the way, so maybe they should be thanking us. But the bottom line here is that the president is going to defend the national interest and the national security of the United States, which is under threat by these terrorist organizations.
And look, I think that's really important. Again, the Maduro regime can be bad and the cartels can be bad, but grouping them together and assuming they're the same, I don't think sets us up for success. We've talked about this before when looking at the cartels in Mexico, or even something a little more familiar to us. If we look at some of the jihadi groups in the Middle East and just group them together with some of these governments, it doesn't fit. I mean, if you go back to 2003, the invasion of Iraq, we were trying so hard to lump in Al-Qaeda with Saddam and the Ba'ath regime. Like, they were both bad, but trying to assume that it required, the same skill set, the same missions, the same capabilities to go after both of those and accomplish the same thing at the end just was not accurate at all. And I'm a little bit concerned that we're doing that same thing here, grouping, two bad groups together to kind of make the narrative a little easier to stomach. And that probably means we won't be as effective as possible against either one of them. Now, we are still seeing some pushback here in the United States. Representative Don Bacon, a Republican, mentioned just yesterday, hey, if we are actually going to war in Venezuela, the president has to come to Congress and get that approved. I don't think that's going to happen one bit, but it's still kind of a debate. Here we go.
As we now know, for example, that President Trump was briefed this week in the past few days on various options for U.S. military operations inside Venezuela, not necessarily in the Caribbean on the water, but on land in Venezuela. Do you have any concerns at all that the U.S. could be headed for war there?
Well, if we're going to go to war with Venezuela, the president needs to make his case, and they've done zero on this. I know we've targeted, approximately 20 boats that are being accused of carrying drugs. And by the way, there is some sympathy in Congress to stop this. We lose 100,000 people a year, but he should come to Congress, and if he wants to do continued operations on these boats, should get authorization. And if he's going to invade or do something with Venezuela, he needs to make his case, because right now there's zero case being made for why we would do this with Venezuela.
Look, I get it that that's probably how it should work, and we've talked about it numerous times in this channel. I think that we have kind of taken advantage as a country, or administration after administration, taken advantage of the powers vested in the executive to carry out lethal strikes abroad and kind of creep into larger and larger military confrontation. I think that's been a problem. I think it's been a problem for a long time, and this is just the most recent iteration of that. So I appreciate Representative Bacon saying, don't worry, anything larger than this is going to have to go to Congress, but let's be realistic. It's not. And most of the reporting we're seeing recently is that the administration is finding whatever loopholes are needed to be able to carry out these strikes and maybe even expand them in Venezuela without having congressional approval or needing it for that matter. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.